Hey Internet, Vazzaroth here. So I've been watching the premiere of Big Brother 23. I've been trying to keep an eye out for what kind of types we might be seeing in these people, MBTI types, personality types. And I'm going to make this video where I kind of go over my initial just typing and what I'm really seeing in the first, it's been a little bit over 24 hours at this point. So normally with these casts, we end up getting a pretty good idea of who they are as a person before they even go in the house. But this year, I don't know if it was like COVID protocols or that late replacement or something, but we actually didn't really get a whole lot of interviews in video form, and I find it really hard to get a good sense of someone's inner world, someone's personality, without actually seeing them move around like on camera and stuff. Body language and everything else is a part of it. So now that we've actually seen them move in, I feel like I've got enough to get an initial assessment for, but I do just want to be very upfront and clear. I'm not like an authority on any of this. I'm just like a guy with a hobby on a personality type. It's something that I just like to think about, and it's kind of something that I think about while I'm watching reality TV quite a bit. And I'm a little honestly surprised that there's not as much reality TV coverage when it comes to personality type, MBTI, etc. It seems like a perfect fit. I see some people on Twitter talking about that, but not nearly as much as I would really expect. So here we go. I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring. And just a note, if you're new to personality type, or you're just kind of a casually getting into it or something like that, the way that I pretty much type and think about this kind of stuff is I go off of basically Myers-Briggs MBTI, and I take it in a cognitive function direction. If you are unfamiliar with that, for instance, 16 Personalities doesn't talk about cognitive functions. If you just type into YouTube MBTI cognitive functions, you'll have a lot of content to look at. Not all of it's great, but a lot of it is. And if you're trying to get more resources and more of an understanding and get your feet underneath you on what some of the stuff I'm going to be saying means, I'm going to be doing my best to explain in relatively layman's terms what's going on as far as these cognitive functions and their types. But I'm not going to be getting deep into like theory. This is not like a tutorial video. There's lots of those out there. So yeah, feel free. Actually, if you go to my channel, you'll see some of my favorite channels that I watched that really got me into this. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. And I'm actually going to put in the description a Frank James video where he kind of goes over more or less how I type, and you'll see that through here. So maybe go check out some of Frank James' videos. But again, feel free to please keep watching. Leave me a comment if you have any interest in me making a video where I explain some of the stuff I talk about. But overall, just again, it's very early in the season, and so just I really just want to be very clear that yeah, I'm treating these kind of as like TV characters. They are real people. I'm not going deep into like their social media. I'm not going into like detective mode to try to figure out like all their childhood trauma or whatever. I'm mostly just going off of their intro package on the first episode when they went into the house, some of their preseason interviews, both the couple of video ones that existed and their text ones, a couple of the people who I was like wanted a little bit more info on. I did go on their social media briefly, but nothing too deep. And then also, again, if you're an MBTI person who's less into Big Brother, check out RHAP. Rob has a podcast. There's some great coverage on there, and I'm also going off of some of the live feed coverage and the live feeds from first night in my typing. So that's really the entire scope of it. By no means do I think I'm going to be nailing these 100%. This is just initial calls on what I'm seeing, and then taking an educated guess on where they might go from there. I fully expect to be wrong on like 50% of these at minimum. So I did this last year on Twitter, and I actually feel like I got pretty close, at least, beginning of season Vaz versus end of season Vaz. I kind of had a lot of the same ideas. So I'm doing this to see how I end up with this. And if you agree, if you disagree, like by all means, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you're seeing that I might not be seeing, or a different perspective. I think typing people, as long as it's done in a not very extremely judgmental way and not from a invasive way, it's pretty much just fun. It's something akin to like astrology, or like when you meet someone at a party and you say like, what's your sign? And then you kind of just have like an idea of how they might be, that kind of stuff. I think of it, just something to like give you a general idea of like what someone might be like. And also, I don't necessarily think that any particular type is like more well suited for Big Brother or anything like that. I think that we pretty much could see a winner of almost any type, especially when it comes to like jury management and stuff like that. I think that's kind of the beauty of Big Big Brother is that there's even the comp beasts, like what you might think of as like a censor or something. They have to like have a social game too. You can't just be you have to be well rounded. So anyway, so again, just number one, it's very early. Number two, by no means am I trying to like say I'm like a scientific expert on this kind of thing. And just number three, keep in mind these are just people on your TV, and we don't have to go and like harass someone or like yell at them about their personality type or anything like that. Please don't do that. Okay, so just before I get into the specific cast analysis, lightning quick recap of the way the MBTI works in case you're new or you just need a refresher. Basically, the idea is that everybody has essentially 4 cognitive functions in their stack. There's a total of 8 cognitive functions available. There's basically thinking, feeling, those are the judgment functions, sensing, and then intuition. Those are perceiving functions. So they're less about making a decision. They're more about how you get information about your environment and your world and things like that. And so, you have a stack of 4. Those are your 4 preferred cognitive functions, and they kind of line up in a certain way. But they don't necessarily, that doesn't dictate like what you're able to do. It's just what you have a preference for doing. Just lightning quick. An intuitive is likely to be more abstract in their word choice and what they focus on, whereas a sensor is more likely to be concrete. And someone who is a feeler preference is likely to talk about both emotions, morals, how people feel, that a little bit more often, and their how actions have consequences on those things, versus like a thinker who's more likely to approach things as like in a problem-solving mindset and is more about like trying to get to some kind of like end, like a puzzle or something like that. So that's just like the very basic levels. You'll see 4 letters. I'm not going to get into all that, honestly. That's beyond the scope of this. But basically, if you're an introvert, like an INTP is what my type is, you're more likely to be a little bit less extroverted and outgoing, but that's not necessarily always the case. So there is a difference between sort of social extroversion and personality extroversion and introversion. So anyway, again, look it up if you want more info, but just that should be enough to get you started. Okay, so I want to go ahead and start with Travis. Travis he's like the Hawaiian guy, right? So he talks about living in Hawaii a lot. And one of the first things that I noticed with him is he was very, he even described himself as like business oriented. He says he likes to like have a lot of clients and like have a lot of like success. So what I was seeing with Travis, what really stood out to me right away is he seemed like an externally oriented person as far as like goals and things like that. He kind of wanted to talk about his achievements and business and stuff like that. He's talked about being like popular and things along those lines. What I'm really seeing from him is like some kind of EJ personality, but possibly an EP. He was on the first night of the feeds, he was always sort of in the conversations. He was one of like the key players in most conversations I was seeing. When I was watching, they were kind of there was this sort of like core of dudes forming, which, I mean, it's Big Brother early in the game. That happens pretty much every time. And Travis was like a key player in that. So I think that he's going to be somewhat of a leader, or sees himself as somewhat of a leader for like whatever's going to be like the bros. I'm calling it like the bro core that's starting to form. So this season, I would say that there's still bros in the house. I mean, there pretty much always is, right? But this season, it seems like they've actually kind of went out of their way with like new casting and stuff like that. Try to get some more, for lack of a better word, like chill bros rather than maybe like hyper aggressive bros. But Travis specifically, I feel like actually kind of not as I was expecting based on some of the preseason stuff, but once he got in there, Travis seems like he might be the kind of the core of the traditional bro that we've seen, gameplay. Like he might be the one trying to start like an all guys alliance. I think there's even some maybe whispers of that happening a bit. But overall, I'm going to say that I see some intuition in him. I see him as being extroverted and most likely a thinker. So we're going ENT, and I'm a little bit torn on J or P. At first, I was really leaning ENTP with his overall demeanor, but kind of want to go out on a limb and officially call him as possibly ENTJ. I think that he's probably more of like a judging type, but I do think that he's kind of got a persona that he's cultivated, like with this living in Hawaii thing, and again, kind of like talking about how he likes to live in Hawaii and all this all the time. I feel like he tries to kind of play up being a little bit more flexible, I guess, like a little bit more laid back than he really might be. But to some degree, that's total speculation. So I'm gonna say ENTJ. Let's lock that in as my like official guess. But I wouldn't be surprised if I come around to thinking of him as an ENTP before long. He's kind of got that achievement orientation that both those types have, and yeah, again, it's just so early. Spoiler. I'm gonna be saying that a lot. It's so early. These are first impressions. So, all right, that's Travis. And so next, after Travis, I feel like it's only natural to follow up with Christian. Christian is the guy that I kept confusing with Travis, like in the live feeds when they started, like from a distance in a crowd. They both have like curly, like looks like they got a perm or something hair. I think that's just their natural hair, maybe, probably. But Christian, compared to Travis, Christian's kind of hitting more of like a sensor for me. Travis, I felt like was pretty giving me some like intuitive vibes and just signs like pretty right away. Whereas Christian was more like pretty much came off as like a sensor pretty quick to me. He was someone that was talking about like getting bored in his hometown. I think that was him, and wanting to kind of like always be on the go or like doing something. He seems very like concrete oriented, concrete speech patterns, talking about specific things, stuff like that. Not really what you would see with an intuitive most times, where they're talking about like concepts rather than things. But I do think he's almost certainly an extrovert. That plays out in the first night of feeds. He was much like Travis. He was kind of in the middle of like almost everything, or not everything, but at any one time he was always in the middle of something. He's kind of moving between groups and settling down and broing out there for a while. He's definitely got that bro like he fits that type of player, but he's a little bit different than Travis. Whereas Travis might be more like the bro organizer, it seems like Christian's more like a comp threat, the kind of guy that probably has it in his mind that he's going to win out. Whether that's realistic or not, we'll see. But yeah, overall, Christian, I really liked him, honestly. I wasn't expecting to as much. I kind of thought Christian and Travis were going to like have swapped personalities a little bit. Yeah, the main, it's kind of funny, but one of the first things I wrote in my notes about Christian is that boy is fast. He is so fast. He sprinted to go hit that button when his team was trying to win that first comp, and dude, that was like one of the fastest sprints I've seen on a Big Brother comp in a long time. So, this is not much to go off of, but I'm seeing like an SE in him, probably an SE dominant, because he's probably an extrovert. Again, he spoke very concretely about basically everything. I'm not so sure on the rest of his stack. It's really hard to call, but I feel that he is a feeler. Actually, I didn't see a lot of like leading with logic, and treating things like a puzzle. I mostly saw him treating things kind of what I mostly saw from Christian is he seemed to be trying to connect with people pretty authentically, and he seems like the kind of guy, kind of what you see is what you get. He speaks about like his looks a decent amount. He's talking about like his pretty blue eyes or whatever it was he was talking about, and his hair and everything else. So I think he's probably got some focus on like aesthetics, again, probably SE. And I'm thinking there's probably some FI after that. Really what I'm seeing from him is I'm going to call it ESFP right here. So he might be an ESTP, but I feel that I'm picking up on more of like a values, morals, and feelings type guy, especially with the talking about aesthetics and wanting to come off a certain way and stuff like that. So overall, I think he's going to be a pretty interesting character. I think that he's very likely to be in that bro core with Travis, but I think he's probably going to be... Honestly, I'd be surprised if this guy doesn't end up in like a showmance. I can't remember everyone who's like single or whatever, but I think Christian was one of the ones who is probably going to be picked out to be in a showmance. So we'll see how that works with his potential natural bro alliance. But yeah, ESFP, I'm going to put in a second bid on ESTP maybe, but I feel pretty good about that. I don't think he's an EJ. He just doesn't have that kind of like determined, focused energy like some of the stuff that I was seeing from Travis and some of the other people on the cast. So that's Christian. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the women now, a couple of them. So I'm going to start with Alyssa. And the reason why I want to start with her is honestly, I had a hard time getting honestly, I had a hard time getting like a good read on Alyssa. I had heard, I'm pretty sure it was her from some of the live feed people, that she was kind of sick when the live feed switched on, so maybe that's part of it. Overall, though, unlike the two pretty obvious like extroverts that I had seen, I just talked about, Alyssa is one of the first people that stood out as like an introvert to me, at least likely. And just looking at her bio here. She's a swimwear designer, so generally like a designer, I feel like a lot of times ends up being somewhat of an introvert, sometimes an intuitive, but could be a sensor. And then she describes herself as witty, sarcastic, and outgoing. She does put outgoing in there, and I did see that she was involved in conversations, but if this might just be me, I don't know, but I feel like I find IS types, introverted sensing types, to definitely be more likely to be socially extroverted than like introverted intuitive types. So that's not that surprising. I think there's most IS types are probably fall into like the realm of like an ambivert or like type of person that depends on the situation. So I don't think that's a disqualifier from being like an introvert in MBTI. And then her favorite activities, and again, this is partially why I think she's an IS, introverted sensor. Weightlifting, videography, video editing, although video editing, depends. Boating with friends, going to a dog park with her 2 dogs, and going to Siesta Key Beach to watch the sunset. So really what I'm getting from that is big SF energy. So that would be sensor feeler. I'm not seeing a lot of like thinking preference in there. And I'm not just talking about her bio. I'm talking about her first night in the house. I kind of just described her as like a chill girl for a lot of the times. Again, maybe she was just sick. Yeah, I was really having a hard time even finding her on the feeds or the episodes. She was just kind of there every once in a while. Overall, I feel like she's probably an ISFP. I don't see a lot of IJ energy in her, although it's possible if she was sick, maybe she just wasn't showing that. She seems like a go with the flow kind of person in a lot of ways. ISFPs a lot of times are kind of that way. They kind of give off like a relaxed demeanor often. They typically are like the type of person that is confidently themselves in a lot of different situations, and kind of things with that FI really high up. They kind of put themselves in situations rather than have situations put on them, if that makes sense. And with Alyssa, I'm really not seeing the lead SE like I am with the boys that I covered, but I do think that there's a good chance she has SE somewhere in there. Again, she, a lot of her things that she talked about were sensing experiences. Anybody could want to go to the beach, obviously. Yeah, the fact that, out of your whole life, if that's what you pick and you want to put in your bio, then I think that does give us some insight into what your inner world is like. So overall, I'm seeing probably a sensor, probably a feeler, leaning towards introverted. So we're going ISF. And then we're just down to whether it's ISFP or ISFJ. She didn't give me the impression that she's like a very like driven for a specific thing, like often person, which is how I think an IJ usually is. Again, this is a game, so we're seeing just an aspect of people's personality. It's they're just meeting people and stuff like that. It's hard to say, but I'm going to go ahead and lock in ISFP for Alyssa, and I'm not super confident on that, but I don't have a better option. I was considering ISFJ or ISTJ, but I feel like ISFP is where I would be most comfortable putting her. And side note, for some of the ones where I maybe am less sure, I am basically connecting them with sort of other house guests who I've seen before, and personalitydatabase.com, which is pretty cool. People can vote on what they think everyone's personality types are. Some other ISFPs who are rated on there by the community are Kemi, Julia, Nolan, one of the twins. I wonder if the other twins ISFP, I don't actually know. Jen Johnson, who you remember if you've watched for the show for a while. She's a very interesting person, very interesting character for the show. Amber Marcellus, Victor Arroyo, he's a popular guy. So some of those people, I don't know if Victor's an ISFP. That seems a little bit wrong. He seems like generally an extrovert, but maybe. Anyway, so those are the people who we're kind of dealing with here. Alyssa gives me similar vibes to some of them, but again, it's hard to be sure with her. So we'll see where that goes. Okay, so next is Azza. I really think that she is a popular character in the community. She describes herself as charismatic, crafty, and clumsy. I thought that was pretty funny because my wife and I did notice like she was like tripped a little bit and she was a little bit awkward on the opening episode, but she's really like endearing. She's someone who seems like, basically I feel like she's almost certainly a feeler of some kind, probably an introverted feeler. So I'm looking at an IF so far. I really thought for a long time ISFP. I do feel a bit of a censor vibe coming from her, but it's hard to say so far. But I do think that she's probably an ISF. And then I was kind of torn on ISFJ or ISFP. I did type Alyssa as ISFP, and I still think that's the closest I have for her. And I did write down in my notes ISFP for Azza for a long time, but thinking about it now and with the things that we saw on the live feed, she was trying to connect with people, even if she was a little bit awkward at times. Like she kind of looked like maybe she didn't know what to say sometimes, and she would kind of just like stare at the wall a little bit and then like come up with something to say and then say it. I feel like maybe she doesn't have that SE, extroverted sensing that you might see in someone like Alyssa, maybe when she's feeling better. I do see hints of what I would consider to be SI, introverted sensing. Introverted sensing is where you're a little bit more concerned with what like reality means to some degree, rather than like what it just straight is. Has introverted sensing in like their first 2 out of 4 slot is probably going to be a little bit like Azza, likely to be a little bit more clumsy, not always, but sometimes. Fairly often they like to kind of build things, or they're crafty, and a lot of times, again, SE, you can see that anybody can be like this, but just trends. So yeah, I would say she's a biker. She says she's done a lot of achievements as far as like she said she completed, I think it was like 100-mile event or something like that. She loves cooking, and she's like a world traveler. Usually when I'm looking for like SE versus SI, all those things to me indicate more SI. SE, extroverted sensing, is more like what we saw with like Christian and also even Brent doing like flips and stuff in the first like 5 minutes of being introduced. There's like sort of a high energy like pursuit of sensory experiences, whereas an SI person tends to kind of be a little bit more low key in that way. And yeah, I really just, I feel like the more I think about it, the more I see some SI in Azza, and I'm going to say ISFJ. I don't know if she's like falling into stereotypes for IJs necessarily, but we also don't have a lot to work off of. I'm really looking forward to seeing more from Oz. I hope she does well. I know Twitter's definitely rooting for her, a lot of Twitter, and Big Brother community in general. I think that she's primed to do very well if she can get over that little bit of like awkwardness. But I did want to say, by the way, even though she's a bit awkward, I'm not really seeing that trip her up too much, ironically. She is the kind of person that can have like an awkward silence and then comment on the awkward silence. This literally happened. And then that kind of makes everybody feel more at ease with the awkward silence. I was originally thinking that might be like an FI type trait, but I think that's a bit more of a feeler trait. But she might be our first extroverted feeler that I've talked about here as an ISFJ, which is similar to all of my cognitive functions, but in a different order. So I'm a little bit more familiar with seeing that. But yeah, if she's an SIFE, then I think that could explain a lot. While it wasn't my initial impression, I'm actually going to go ahead and lock in ISFJ with another ISFP as an option. And ISFPs are fairly common on like reality TV. That's something that's a type that we see pretty often. So casting definitely like looks for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have multiple ISFPs on the cast. I'm going to say ISFJ for Azza, and with a small caveat that my backup guess is ISFP. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, part of the reason why I am pulling on SI for her more than SE is that she talks about her family history. I think she said her great-grandfather or something was like a polygamist or something, so she has like a huge family tree of like 300 people. She brought that up like 4 different times, and while that's definitely like a fun fact, and I could see why you'd bring that up at a party no matter what your type is, I do feel like she kind of has that SI storytelling that you don't always see in someone who's got SE in their first 2. You know, and she's a little bit artsy. She said she likes Harry Potter, and I really wish I knew what house that she like identifies with. I feel like that would give me a little more insight into who she is. Although, if I'm honest, if she said something like Hufflepuff, that wouldn't help me. I could see that being ISFP or ISFJ. So maybe Gryffindor might lean more towards ISFJ. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you know what she is, if you caught that on the feeds, let me know in the comments. Real quick, just wanted to also add Nicole Franzel on Personality Database is rated ISFJ. Bridget, who was teamed up with Boogie. Jordan, who's a longtime like Big Brother star. A few other people that we kind of know. Sam from a few seasons ago, Robot Sam. Those people are rated ISFJ, so that kind of gives you an idea of like who she's kind of reminding me of, and I would agree with a lot of those in different ways, of course. What I'll be curious to see if she kind of ends up with that like Nicole Franzel like game paranoia, and I feel like if she does, that would be a good indicator of IJ.